A millionaire tries to comfort a child crying desperately on the street, but when he hears her words, he is left paralyzed, shaking with incredulity. In the heart of the city, amid the chaos of a typical morning, the sound of cars and animated conversations was suddenly interrupted by a desperate cry. It was a sharp, piercing sound of pain that seemed to cut through the air like a knife. People absorbed in their own activities started turning their heads, trying to locate the source of the lament. In the middle of the sidewalk, in front of a large department store, stood a small, trembling figure. Sophia, a girl with messy brown hair, seemed lost in a sea of unfamiliar faces. Her tears streamed down her dirty face, mixing with the city's dust. She sobbed, hugging herself as if trying to protect herself from the world around her. What happens next will leave you speechless. Be sure to watch until the end, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications now to be the first to see how this story unfolds. Antonio, a middle-aged man dressed in an immaculate suit, was passing by when the crying caught his attention. He stopped, hesitated for a moment, but the girl's anguished sound made it impossible for him to just walk away. Something in those tearful eyes touched him deeply, and he felt an urgent need to help her. Approaching slowly, Antonio knelt to be at Sophia's level. "Hey, little one, are you okay? What happened?" His voice was calm but carried a genuine concern that he couldn't hide. Sophia looked up at him but couldn't speak. Instead, her crying intensified, echoing louder through the avenue. Antonio's heart ached. "Don't be afraid. I just want to help. Where are your parents?" The girl shook her head vigorously but said nothing. Antonio looked around, searching for any sign of an adult who might be with her, but saw no one. The sidewalk was crowded with people rushing by, indifferent to what was happening there. An elderly woman nearby approached, trying to help. "Sweetie, are you lost? We can take you to your parents," she said with a gentle smile. But Sophia just backed away, visibly frightened, and curled up even more. Antonio exchanged a worried look with the woman. "She's very scared. It looks like something really serious happened. We need to find a way to calm her down. Maybe she's lost," suggested the woman. "But who knows? It could be something worse." Antonio knew he couldn't just leave the girl there alone and scared. He looked into Sophia's eyes again, trying to convey as much calm and reassurance as possible. "I'm going to take care of you, okay? I won't leave you here alone. Let's find a quieter place to talk." Sophia hesitated for a moment, but something in Antonio's voice made her trust him. She nodded slowly, still sobbing, and reached out her hand to him. Antonio smiled gently, taking the little girl's hand. "Let's take a walk and find a calmer place. Everything will be okay." With that, he began guiding her down the sidewalk towards a small cafe he spotted across the street. As they walked, Antonio couldn't help but wonder what could have happened for such a young child to be there alone and so full of fear. As they entered the cafe, the small, cozy place offered a silent refuge amid the city's hustle. Antonio chose a table in the corner, away from the curious glances still directed at Sophia. The girl, now a bit calmer, sat in a chair too big for her small stature, still holding tightly to Antonio's hand as if that simple gesture was the only thing keeping her safe. Clara, the owner of the cafe, noticed the peculiar situation as soon as they entered. With years of experience observing people, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. Approaching with a cup of hot chocolate, she crouched down to Sophia's level and offered the drink with a warm smile. "Here, dear, this will warm you up. It's the best recipe in the house." Sophia looked at the cup, hesitated for a moment, then took it with both small hands. Feeling the warmth emanating from the porcelain, she took a small sip, and something about the sweetness of the chocolate seemed to calm her frayed nerves. Antonio watched intently, not pressing her. He knew he needed to be patient, but the anguish on the girl's face made him uneasy. "Sophia," he began gently, "can you tell me what happened? I promise I'm here to help you, and no one will hurt you." The girl took a deep breath, her eyes still red from crying. I ran away," she whispered, almost inaudible. Her voice trembled with the words, as if they were hard to say. "Ran away? From where?" Antonio asked, keeping his voice calm and comforting. Sophia clutched the cup of hot chocolate tighter, as if she needed something to hold on to. "From the orphanage. I couldn't stand being there anymore. No one wants me. No one picks me. All the other kids. They always leave with new families, but I always get left behind." Clara, who had been listening discreetly, exchanged a worried look with Antonio. The weight of Sophia's words was palpable, and Antonio's heart ached as he heard the desperation in her voice. "Oh dear," Clara said, kneeling beside Sophia. "That's not true. You're a special girl, and I'm sure there's someone looking for you. Someone who will love you very much." Sophia shook her head, and her eyes filled with tears again. "No, I know that's not true. Everyone always chooses others, never me. I just wanted to be loved." Antonio felt a wave of compassion wash over him. He had faced many challenges in life, but seeing such a young, vulnerable girl struggling with such an overwhelming feeling of abandonment was something he wasn't prepared for. He held Sophia's hand more firmly, looking deeply into her eyes. "Sophia, I know you feel this way now, but you're not alone. I promise I'll help you find a place where you feel safe and loved. We'll figure this out together. Okay?" The girl looked at him, and for a brief moment, a glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. "Do you promise?" she asked, her voice fragile. "I promise," Antonio said firmly. "And when I promise, I keep it." Clara nodded silently, agreeing with Antonio's decision. "We can start by going to the police," she suggested, looking at Antonio. "They might help find a solution, and maybe even uncover more about what's going on at that orphanage." Sophia immediately recoiled, panic returning to her face. "No, please, don't take me back. I saw things there, things that scare me." Antonio frowned, concerned. "What kind of things, Sophia?" The girl hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she held the cup. They do bad things there. I don't know exactly what, but I heard the staff talking about selling children. I was scared that it would happen to me." A silence fell over the table. Clara and Antonio exchanged glances, understanding the gravity of what they had just heard. Sophia's words revealed a dark secret, one that couldn't be ignored. Antonio took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Sophia, we're going to protect you, but we need the police's help to ensure nothing bad happens to you or other children." Sophia bit her lip, her gaze shifting from Antonio to Clara, and finally nodded, though hesitantly. "Okay, but you won't leave me alone, right?" "No, dear," Clara said gently, stroking Sophia's hair. "We won't leave you alone. We're all in this together." Antonio felt a growing determination within him. What started as a casual encounter on a busy street was now becoming a mission. The air inside the small cafe was charged with tension, but also with a growing sense of resolve. Antonio looked at Sophia, trying to process everything the girl had revealed. The idea that an orphanage could be involved in something as horrific as child trafficking was inconceivable. But the fear in Sophia's eyes left no room for doubt. Something was very wrong, and he knew he couldn't stand by. Clara, standing next to Sophia, exchanged a serious look with Antonio. "We need to take this to the police, Antonio, but we have to be careful. If this is as serious as it seems, any misstep could put Sophia and other children at risk. Antonio nodded, but a visible concern was on his face. You're right, Clara, but we also need to make sure Sophia feels safe. We can't just take her to the station without preparing her first. She's already been through so much. Clara looked at Sophia, who was absorbed in her hot chocolate, trying to find some comfort in the cup. Maybe we should first talk to someone we trust, someone who can guide us on what to do. Antonio thought for a moment. I know a trusted lawyer, Mr. Valdez. He's a man of integrity, and I know he has experience dealing with sensitive cases like this. Maybe he can help us take this situation to the authorities in the right way without putting Sophia in danger. Clara agreed. That sounds like a good idea. We can go to him now, before the orphanage realizes Sophia is missing and starts looking for her. Sophia, who had been silent until then, looked up, worried. They'll look for me, won't they? They'll try to take me back. Antonio moved closer to her, trying to convey reassurance. Sophia, as long as you're with us, no one will hurt you. We'll protect you, and we'll make sure whatever is happening at that orphanage is exposed. Do you trust us? Sophia hesitated for a moment, but Antonio's sincere gaze made her feel that she had finally found someone she could trust. I trust you. Just, please don't leave me alone. Clara smiled gently. Never, dear. We'll take care of you. Antonio picked up the phone and made a quick call to Mr. Valdez's office, briefly explaining the situation and asking to meet as soon as possible. Fortunately, the lawyer was available and agreed to see them in an hour. We'll be leaving in a few minutes, Antonio told Clara and Sophia. Mr. Valdez's office isn't far from here, and the sooner we handle this, the better. Sophia nodded, though her eyes were still full of uncertainty. Antonio got up and went to the cashier to pay the bill, while Clara helped Sophia put on her coat. Everything will be all right, Sophia, she said, more to reassure the girl than anything else. You're very brave for telling us all this. When they were ready to leave, Clara took Sophia's hand, while Antonio kept a watchful eye around them. They exited the cafe and began walking through the city streets, now less crowded than before but still carrying a sense of urgency. Along the way, Antonio tried to keep the conversation light, talking about everyday things to distract Sophia. You like hot chocolate, don't you? He asked, trying to make the girl feel more comfortable. Yes, she answered timidly. My mom used to make it for me before. Her voice trailed off, and Antonio realized it wasn't the time to press further. Instead, he just smiled and kept walking, remaining attentive to their surroundings. They finally arrived at the building where Mr. Valdez's office was located. It was an old but well-maintained structure with an impressive facade. Antonio guided Sophia and Clara inside, where a receptionist directed them to the waiting area. The silence was almost tangible as they waited. After a few minutes, the door opened, and a middle-aged man with graying hair and a serious demeanor appeared. Antonio, Clara, it's good to see you. And you must be Sophia, he said, kneeling to be at the girl's level. I'm Mr. Valdez, and I'm here to help. Let's go in and talk. They followed the lawyer to his office, a spacious room filled with bookshelves and a large window that let in sunlight. Sophia sat next to Clara, while Antonio and Mr. Valdez took their places around the desk. So, Antonio, tell me what's going on, the lawyer said, his voice calm and attentive. Antonio took a deep breath and began recounting the events of that morning, from finding Sophia crying on the street to the shocking revelation about the orphanage. Mr. Valdez listened in silence, occasionally taking notes. When Antonio finished, the lawyer seemed thoughtful for a moment. This is very serious. If what Sophia is saying is true, we're dealing with something big. We need to act, but with extreme caution. The first step is to protect Sophia and ensure her safety. He turned to the girl. Sophia, what you did was very brave, and now we need to make sure no other child suffers like you did. But you don't have to do this alone. We're here to help, and we'll handle this together. Sophia looked at him with a mix of fear and hope. Will you help me stop them? Mr. Valdez nodded with a determined look. Yes, we will. But first, we need to ensure you're safe, and to do that, we need to report everything to the police the right way. As Mr. Valdez reflected on the next steps, Sophia remained silent, holding Clara's hand tightly. Antonio, sitting beside them, could hardly hide the growing worry inside him. The weight of the responsibility he now carried was something he hadn't anticipated when approaching that crying girl on the street. However, he knew that backing down was not an option. We need to act quickly, Mr. Valdez said, breaking the silence. But we also need to be smart. Any hasty moves could put Sophia in even more danger and alert those responsible for this scheme. We have to ensure that the authorities are fully prepared to handle whatever we find. Antonio agreed, but his expression was still filled with uncertainty. But how can we ensure that Sophia is safe throughout this process? We can't just take her back to the orphanage, and I fear that if we rush things, it will only make matters worse. Mr. Valdez nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. First, we need to arrange a safe place for Sophia to stay while we organize everything. I know of a child protection organization that can help us. They have experience housing children in delicate situations like this. Sophia, who had been quiet until then, looked up, alarmed. I don't want to go to another place. I don't want to be alone again, she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Clara, noticing the growing panic in the girl, quickly tried to calm her down. Dear, you won't be alone. Antonio and I will be with you, no matter what happens. Do you trust us? Sophia looked at Clara, tears welling up in her eyes again. I trust you, but I'm scared. What if they find me? What if they try to take me back? Antonio leaned forward, looking directly into the girl's eyes. We won't let that happen. Promise. We'll make sure you're safe and that these people pay for what they've done. Mr. Valdez watched the interaction with a thoughtful look. Antonio, Clara, if you're willing to take on this responsibility, I'll arrange for Sophia to stay in a safe location but close to you. We'll keep everything confidential and ensure that none of the involved parties know where she is. Antonio nodded, determined. We'll do whatever it takes. Sophia is our priority now. The lawyer made a few quick calls, speaking quietly with his contacts. After a few minutes, he hung up the phone and turned his attention back to the group. Everything is arranged. You can take Sophia to a temporary shelter that works closely with the Child Protection Organization. They've been informed of the situation and will ensure she receives all the attention and care she needs. Sophia seemed more at ease with the idea of Antonio and Clara being nearby, but there was still a shadow of concern in her eyes. I just want this to be over soon, she said, her voice revealing the emotional exhaustion she felt. Clara wrapped her arm around Sophia, hugging her gently. So do we, dear, and we'll do everything we can to make that happen. Mr. Valdez stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. I'll accompany you to the shelter. That way, we can ensure Sophia is settled and safe before anything else. After that, I'll contact the police to coordinate the investigation. As they left the lawyer's office, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with orange and pink hues. There was something surreal about the calmness of the moment. While they walked toward Antonio's car, the world continued to turn, indifferent to the storm brewing in Sophia's life. During the drive, Sophia remained silent, watching the streets pass by the window. Clara and Antonio also didn't say much, each lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. The shelter, when they finally arrived, was a modest house located in a quiet neighborhood. The building, although simple, exuded a sense of security. At the door, a kindly-looking woman greeted them. "Welcome," she said with a smile. "My name is Isabel. I'm in charge of this shelter. We're ready to take care of Sophia and ensure she's safe while you sort everything out." Sophia looked to Antonio and Clara, seeking confirmation that everything would be okay. Clara knelt beside her, holding her hands. "Dear, this is the best option right now. You'll be in a safe place with people who care about you. We'll be around and we'll visit you every day." Antonio also came closer, placing a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "This is temporary, Sophia, just until we sort everything out. Remember, you're not alone. We're all here for you." The girl nodded slowly, still reluctant but trusting Antonio and Clara's words. She hugged them tightly, feeling a mix of fear and hope at the same time. As Clara and Antonio stepped back, Isabel led Sophia inside, talking softly to her, trying to reassure her. Antonio watched the scene for a moment, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on his chest. But he knew he was doing the right thing. When he turned to Clara, he found the same look of determination in her eyes. "Now we need to act quickly. Every minute counts." Clara agreed. "We'll protect Sophia and make sure this network of evil is exposed." With that, they set off, ready to face whatever came next. Night fell over the city, but for Antonio and Clara, the work was just beginning. After ensuring Sophia was safe, they returned to Mr. Valdez's office to plan the next steps. The air was heavy with accumulated tension, and each decision they made seemed to carry immense weight. Sitting around the office table, Antonio and Clara listened attentively as Mr. Valdez outlined the plan. "We need to act in a coordinated manner. The first step is to inform the police about what Sophia has revealed. We need to present the information in a way that ensures the authorities understand the seriousness of the situation without putting Sophia's life at risk." Clara, who had been silent for much of the discussion, finally spoke, her voice laden with concern. "Valdez, what if the orphanage is already aware that Sophia has run away? They might be trying to cover up the evidence right now." The lawyer nodded, understanding the urgency. "That's a real risk, Clara. That's why we need to act immediately. I'll contact Detective Ramiro. He's someone I trust in the police force and has experience with child exploitation cases. I'll explain the situation and ask him to start an investigation under the strictest confidentiality." Antonio, who had maintained a serious expression, interjected. "And what about us? What can we do while the police are working?" Mr. Valdez considered for a moment before answering. "You've both done a lot already. Now, the best thing you can do is continue offering emotional support to Sophia. It's important that she knows she's not alone, especially since the investigation might take time, and she'll need all the support she can get." Clara sighed, knowing he was right. "I'm worried about what else Sophia might be hiding. She's so young and has been through so much. I don't know how deep these traumas go." "We need to be patient," Antonio said, holding Clara's hand. "She'll open up in her own time, and when she does, we'll be here to listen." Mr. Valdez stood up, indicating that the meeting was coming to a close. "Now I'll make the necessary calls. I suggest you both go home and get some rest. Tomorrow, I'll update you on any developments. I know it's difficult, but we need to be prepared for a long battle." Antonio and Clara nodded, still hesitant, but they knew there wasn't much more they could do that night. The feeling of helplessness accompanied them as they left the office and walked through the now nearly deserted city streets. The idea of going home and trying to rest seemed absurd, given everything that was happening. When they finally reached the car, Clara turned to Antonio. "I know we need to rest, but I can't stop thinking about Sophia. She's so small, Antonio, and she's carrying such a heavy burden." Antonio, usually the more rational of the two, felt his emotions take over. "I know, Clara, but we have to be strong for her. We promised we'd protect her, and we're going to keep that promise. The best thing we can do now is make sure we're ready to act when the police need us." Clara nodded, though reluctantly, and they drove home in silence. The night was long, and sleep didn't come easily. Images of Sophia, scared and vulnerable, danced in their minds, preventing them from finding any peace. The next morning, just at dawn, Antonio was awakened by the sound of his phone. It was Mr. Valdez. "Antonio, I spoke with Detective Ramiro. He's willing to meet with you this afternoon to discuss the details. He also suggested the meeting be discreet, at a location outside the station, to avoid any unwanted attention." Antonio nodded, even though Mr. Valdez couldn't see him. "Thanks, Valdez. We'll get ready for it." When he hung up, he turned to Clara, who was already awake and looking at him with anticipation. "Detective Ramiro wants to meet with us this afternoon. It'll be at a discreet location to make sure nothing gets out of hand." Clara took a deep breath, trying to control her anxiety. "That's good. It means they're taking it seriously." The day passed slowly as Antonio and Clara prepared for the meeting. They spent some time together, trying to find distractions to keep their minds off their worries, but it was nearly impossible. Sophia was always in their thoughts, and what she had revealed continued to haunt them. Finally, the time came, and they went to meet Detective Ramiro at a discreet cafe in the city center. Upon arrival, they were greeted by a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor and a penetrating gaze. He shook their hands firmly and led them to a table in the back of the establishment, away from curious ears. "Mr. Valdez told me about the situation," the detective began bluntly, "and I must say, this is one of the most sensitive investigations I've ever handled. We need to be extremely careful, both for Sophia's safety and the integrity of the investigation." Antonio and Clara nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I've started gathering some information about the orphanage, but there's still a lot we don't know. We need Sophia's full statement, but I understand she might not be ready to talk about everything yet. We need to be patient and earn her trust." Clara, with a soft voice, asked, "And what will happen after? How can we ensure she won't be forced to go back to that place?" Detective Ramiro sighed. "That's the biggest challenge. If we can get enough evidence, we can ensure the orphanage is shut down and that Sophia never has to go back there. But until then, we need to protect her and make sure no one knows where she is. The investigation will be complicated and time-consuming, but if we do it right, we can expose everyone involved." Antonio looked directly into the detective's eyes. "We're ready to do whatever it takes. Sophia can't go back to that place." Detective Ramiro nodded, agreeing. "We'll start from today. We'll stay in constant contact, and anything you notice, no matter how small, let me know immediately. We're dealing with people who will do anything to protect their interests, so we can't afford to make mistakes." The meeting concluded with a firm agreement among all present. Antonio and Clara left the cafe with a mix of hope and apprehension. They knew they were racing against time, but now they were certain they were not alone in this fight. I want to know what you think of the story so far. If this story is touching you, give it a like and comment on what impressed you the most and where you're watching from. The drive home was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Antonio finally broke the silence. "We're on the right track, Clara. Now, it's a matter of time and perseverance." Clara nodded, but her eyes still showed the concern she felt. "I just hope time is on our side, Antonio." The days following the meeting with Detective Ramiro were intense and filled with uncertainty. Antonio and Clara made daily visits to Sophia at the shelter, trying to keep the environment light and welcoming, but the tension was palpable. The girl, although more confident in their presence, still carried a deep sadness in her eyes, a shadow that seemed unshakable. Meanwhile, Detective Ramiro was working tirelessly to gather evidence and build a solid case against the orphanage. His investigations revealed that the place had a history of suspicious activities but had never been formally investigated. The pieces were starting to come together, but time was an unforgiving adversary. During one of their visits to the shelter, Antonio and Clara found Sophia more at ease, even a little smiley. Isabel, the shelter manager, greeted them with an enthusiastic look. "Sophia is making progress," she said as she led them to the living room where the girl was. She started to interact more with the other children and even shared some details about what happened at the orphanage. Antonio and Clara exchanged relieved glances. "That's great," Clara said, approaching Sophia, who was sitting on a rug playing with a puzzle. "Hi, dear. How are you today?" Sophia looked up and smiled shyly. "I'm good. Isabel helped me remember some things I was scared to tell." Antonio sat down beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're very brave, Sophia, and everything you tell us will help ensure that other children don't suffer as you did." Sophia hesitated for a moment but then began to speak, her voice still fragile. "I heard some conversations between the staff. They talked about people who came to the orphanage and paid money to take the children away. I didn't understand exactly what they were doing, but whenever one of these people showed up, a child would disappear." Clara felt a lump form in her throat but kept her composure to avoid alarming Sophia. "And did you see any of these people, dear? Can you tell us what they looked like?" Sophia nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw. There was a man. He was tall and had a very serious face. I remember because he had a scar on his face. Everyone was afraid of him, even the adults. They called him Mr. Leon. When he came, the children would hide." Antonio exchanged a significant look with Clara. What Sophia was describing was not just child trafficking but something more organized and meticulous. "Sophia, what happened when this man came? Were you there?" "I was," Sophia replied, her voice trembling. "He came to take a boy who was my friend. His name was Pedro. We played together, but one day he left. Mr. Leon came and took him. No one ever spoke about Pedro again. It was like he had never existed." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes but held them back. "And you never knew where he went?" Sophia shook her head. "No. No one ever talked about the children who disappeared. And when I asked, they just said they were adopted. But I knew it was a lie because none of the other children ever had visits from prospective adoptive parents. It was always at night, always hidden." Antonio held Sophia's hand firmly. "You did the right thing by telling us this, Sophia. You're very brave, and now we can do something to help the other children who are there." The girl looked at him with eyes full of doubt and hope. "Do you think they can help the other children? That no one else will disappear?" "I promise, Sophia," Antonio said with a firmness he hoped would ease her fears. "We'll do everything we can to stop this from continuing." That night, after leaving Sophia at the shelter, Antonio and Clara went directly to Mr. Valdez's office. The lawyer was waiting for them, anxious to hear the updates. When they shared what Sophia had told them, the gravity of the situation became even more evident. "This information is crucial," Mr. Valdez said, his face tense. "We need to act immediately. This confirms Detective Ramiro's suspicions. And now we have Sophia's testimony as a key piece to move the case forward." Antonio nodded. "But how can we ensure Sophia stays protected? We can't risk these criminals finding out that she spoke." Mr. Valdez thought for a moment before responding. "We need to place Sophia in a witness protection program, at least until the investigation progresses enough to ensure her safety. I'll talk to Detective Ramiro about this, but we need to move quickly. Clara, who had been silent until then, spoke with determination. And what about Mr. Leon? Can we find this man? He seems to be an important figure in this network. Detective Ramiro is already working on identifying this person, Mr. Valdez said. But it won't be easy. We're dealing with a very cautious organization, and any misstep could make them disappear without a trace. The tension in the room was palpable, but everyone knew there was no time for hesitation. Each of them was now deeply involved in a dangerous game where the lives of many children were at stake. As they left the office, Antonio felt a mix of relief and apprehension. They were making progress, but the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. He knew the coming weeks would be crucial and that he would need all his strength to protect Sophia and ensure justice was done. As they said goodbye to Mr. Valdez, Clara turned to Antonio, her expression serious. "We're doing the right thing, Antonio, but I'm so afraid for Sophia." "So am I," Antonio replied, squeezing her hand. "But we need to keep going. Now more than ever." The following days were filled with extreme tension. With each step taken by the investigation team, led by Detective Ramiro, new revelations emerged, and the pieces of the puzzle finally began to fall into place. Mr. Leon, the man with the scar Sophia had mentioned, was a central figure in a complex child trafficking network. However, he remained a mystery, always managing to evade investigations. Antonio and Clara kept a close watch on everything, but their concern for Sophia never left them. Each visit to the shelter was a reminder of how much the girl had been through and how much was still at stake. Isabel, the shelter manager, did her best to ensure Sophia felt safe, but the shadows of the past still haunted her. One afternoon, while Antonio and Clara were visiting, Detective Ramiro arrived with a serious expression. He asked to speak with Antonio privately. They went to a more secluded corner of the shelter, where Ramiro began to speak in a low voice. "Antonio, we have a serious problem. We've discovered that the shelter is involved in something even bigger than we thought. The child trafficking network Sophia mentioned is connected to international groups, and it seems they are already aware that Sophia has escaped and is cooperating with us." Antonio felt a chill run down his spine. "Do they know where she is?" Ramiro shook his head. "Not yet. We've managed to keep the information confidential, but they are looking for her. We need to act quickly. We are organizing an operation to shut down the shelter and arrest those responsible. But until then, Sophia is at great risk." Antonio took a deep breath, trying to process the information. "What can we do? We can't leave her in danger." Ramiro placed a firm hand on Antonio's shoulder. "I've already spoken with Mr. Valdez. We're arranging for Sophia to be moved to a secure location under full protection. It won't be easy for her, but it's the only way to ensure her safety until we can resolve everything." Antonio was silent for a moment, considering the implications. Sophia had already been through so much. He knew that protecting her was the priority, but moving her away from everything she knew, including Clara and himself, was a heavy burden. "When will the transfer happen?" "Tonight," Ramiro replied. "It's the only way to ensure we're not caught off guard." Antonio went back to Clara, who was anxiously waiting. When he explained the plan, she was visibly shaken. "They're going to take her away from here? It seems so drastic, Antonio." "I know, Clara," he said, his voice laden with sorrow. "But it's the only way to ensure Sophia's safety. We have to trust what Detective Ramiro is doing." Sophia, unaware of the conversation, was playing with other children in the shelter's garden. The timid smile on her face showed that she was, even if just for brief moments, beginning to find some peace. Clara looked at her with tears in her eyes. "She's already suffered so much, and now we have to take her even further away." The time for the transfer came quicker than they expected. When Antonio and Clara approached Sophia to explain the situation, the girl immediately sensed that something was wrong. "What's happening? Are you going to leave me here?" Antonio knelt in front of her, holding her small hands. "Sophia, dear, we need to make sure you're safe. Detective Ramiro is going to take you to a place where no one can hurt you. It's only temporary, until everything is resolved." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "But you're coming with me, right? I don't want to be alone." Clara, with a trembling voice, tried to comfort her. "Sophia will always be nearby, no matter what happens. We'll never leave you. This is just to keep you safe, dear." Sophia sobbed, feeling helpless in the situation. "I just want this to be over soon." Antonio's heart ached. "So do we, Sophia, and we're doing everything we can to make sure it ends as quickly as possible. I promise that soon you'll be home, safe, and without any more worries." With Detective Ramiro's support, Sophia was discreetly taken to a safe location that same night. The silence in the car during the trip was heavy, broken only by Clara's soft whispers, trying to calm the girl. The destination was a simple, secluded house run by a witness protection organization. There, Sophia would be under constant surveillance, protected by agents ensuring her safety until the investigation concluded. After leaving her, Antonio and Clara returned home, their hearts heavy from the farewell. Sophia's absence, even if temporary, deeply affected them. They both felt that the girl had already become an irrevocable part of their lives. The next day, Ramiro made an urgent call to Antonio. "We have important news. We've finally identified Mr. Leon. His real name is Ernesto Aguilar, one of the leaders of an international child trafficking network. We're planning a major operation to capture him and shut down the shelter, but we'll need Sophia's testimony to ensure justice is served." Antonio listened in silence, processing the detective's words. "Do you think we can finally put an end to this?" Ramiro sighed. "I think so, but it will be a tough fight. We're dealing with powerful people willing to do anything to protect their interests. However, now that we know who they are, we have a real chance to dismantle this network and save other children." The tension increased with each passing minute as Antonio and Clara awaited news from the operation planned by Detective Ramiro and his team. They knew the next move could be the decisive blow to dismantle the child trafficking network, but they also understood the risks involved. The safety of Sophia, now hidden in a secure location, was the main concern for everyone. That night, as the city plunged into darkness, Antonio received a call from Mr. Valdez. "Antonio, the operation is underway. Detective Ramiro has secured a warrant for Ernesto Aguilar, Mr. Leon. They are surrounding the shelter right now." Antonio felt a mix of relief and apprehension. "And Sophia? Will she need to testify?" "Yes," Valdez replied, "but not now. First, we need to ensure Aguilar is arrested and the shelter is shut down. Only then can we think about Sophia's testimony with all necessary security." Clara, who had been listening to the conversation, squeezed Antonio's hand, her face reflecting the same mix of emotions. They knew they were on the brink of victory, but also understood that the battle was far from over. Hours later, they finally received an update from Detective Ramiro. "We did it," he said, his voice heavy with fatigue but also relief. "Ernesto Aguilar is in custody, and the orphanage has been shut down. We have enough evidence to incriminate him and others involved in the network." Antonio and Clara exchanged glances, feeling an enormous weight lift off their shoulders. "That's great news, Ramiro," Antonio said, trying to control the emotion in his voice. "And the other children? What about the other kids from the orphanage?" "They're being taken to a safe place," Ramiro replied. "None of them will go back to the orphanage. Now, we need to focus on making sure Aguilar is convicted. For that, Sophia's testimony will be crucial. Clara nodded, knowing how difficult this would be for Sophia. She's been through so much already, but I know she wants to help. In the following days, Sophia was informed about the operation's outcome. Isabel, with great care and sensitivity, explained to the girl that Mr. Leon had been arrested and that now it was time to ensure he was held accountable for his actions. "You're very brave, Sophia," Isabel said, holding the girl's small hands. "If you're ready, your voice can help prevent other children from suffering like you did." Although still frightened, Sophia showed a courage that surprised everyone. "I want him to be arrested. I want him to never hurt anyone again." Antonio and Clara stood by her side as Sophia gave her testimony to Detective Ramiro. It was a difficult moment, but Sophia displayed a strength that few would expect from someone so young. She described what she saw and heard at the orphanage, providing details that helped corroborate the evidence already gathered by the police. With Sophia's testimony, the case against Ernesto Aguilar and his accomplices became even stronger. The trial was set, and the anticipation for justice for Sophia and the other children grew with each passing day. But as expected, Aguilar's lawyers did not make it easy. They tried to discredit Sophia's testimony, claiming she was just a traumatized child unable to distinguish reality from fantasy. It was a low blow that deeply affected Sophia, but Antonio, Clara, and Isabel supported her every step of the way. "You did the right thing, Sophia," Antonio said, holding her firmly after one of the toughest sessions in court. "No matter what they say, the truth will prevail." Sophia, although shaken, nodded. "I just want this to be over soon." Finally, after weeks of testimonies, arguments, and evidence presentation, the verdict was announced. Ernesto Aguilar was found guilty of all the charges brought against him. The sentence was harsh, reflecting the severity of the crimes he and his organization had committed. For Sophia and everyone involved, it was a bittersweet victory, filled with painful memories but also a sense of justice. On the day the verdict was announced, Antonio and Clara took Sophia to a quiet park outside the city. They wanted her to have a moment of peace, away from the spotlight and the pressure. As they walked along the tree-lined paths, Sophia finally seemed to relax a bit, enjoying the sunshine filtering through the trees. "Sophia," Clara began, sitting beside the girl on a wooden bench. "Everything you did, you helped so many other children. You're very brave." Sophia, looking at the lake ahead where a few ducks swam peacefully, sighed. "I just want to be happy now. I want to have a family." Antonio, who had been standing nearby, knelt down beside Sophia. "And you will have one, Sophia. We promised we would never leave you alone, and we won't. You will always have us." Sophia looked at them, and for the first time in a long while she genuinely smiled. "I love you," she whispered, and as she said it, she knew it was true. Antonio and Clara embraced her, feeling that finally, after so much pain and struggle, Sophia could begin to build a new life, one filled with love and security. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Sophia had found something she had always wished for: a family. In the days following the verdict, Antonio and Clara focused on helping Sophia adjust to her new life. Although she was still under the protection of the authorities, the immediate danger had passed, and the focus now was to provide her with the kind of life she had always dreamed of. Antonio and Clara's home, once quiet and orderly, had become a place brimming with life and joy. Sophia's laughter, once rare in the early days, became a constant melody that filled every room. They did everything together, from making breakfast to picking out clothes for the day. Sophia, who had always been a shy and reserved child, was beginning to show her vibrant personality. One afternoon, while Clara and Sophia were in the kitchen baking cookies, Antonio entered the room with a thoughtful expression. "Clara, Can we talk for a moment? He looked at Sophia, who was concentrating on cutting the cookies into star shapes. Keep going, sweetie. I'll be right back. Clara followed Antonio to the study, where he closed the door behind them. What's going on, Antonio? She asked, concerned. I've been thinking a lot about the future, he began, hesitating for a moment. About Sophia. After everything we've been through together, I think it's time to take the next step. Clara furrowed her brow, confused. What kind of step? Antonio took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Clara, I think we should consider officially adopting Sophia, not just taking care of her temporarily, but giving her a permanent home where she knows she will always have a family. Clara's eyes filled with emotion at his words. Antonio, are you sure? Adopting is a huge responsibility, and Sophia is still recovering from everything that happened. Antonio nodded, holding Clara's hands. I know, and that's exactly why I think we should do it. Sophia is already a part of our lives. She trusts us, and we love her as our daughter. I don't want her to feel like she could be taken away from us at any moment. I want her to know that this is her place forever. Clara smiled, tears in her eyes. I want that too, Antonio. She is already like a daughter to me. Let's give her the security and love she deserves. Determined, Antonio and Clara began researching the legal procedures for adoption. Mr. Valdez, as always, was ready to help, guiding them through each step of the process. Sophia, who was still unaware of the couple's intention, continued to adjust to life with them, finding increasing comfort and happiness in the new routine. A few weeks later, Antonio and Clara decided it was the right time to talk to Sophia about adoption. It was a Sunday afternoon, and everyone was gathered in the living room, enjoying a quiet moment after lunch. Sophia, Antonio began, sitting next to her on the sofa. Clara and I need to talk to you about something very important. The girl looked at him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. What is it? Clara took Sophia's hand, smiling warmly. Sweetheart, we know your life has changed a lot in the past few months. We also know you've lost many things, but you've gained others too, like the love of a new family. Now, we want to know how you would feel if this family were official, if you could stay with us forever. Sophia blinked, trying to understand what was being said. Stay with you forever? You want me to stay here? Antonio smiled, feeling his heart warm with Sophia's innocence. Yes, Sophia, we want you to stay here as our daughter. We want to adopt you so you never have to worry about being taken away. This would be your home, officially. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. You want me to be your real daughter? More than anything, Clara replied, emotional. You're already a part of our lives, Sophia. We can't imagine our home without you. Sophia threw herself into their arms, hugging them with all her might. I want to stay here too. I love you, and I want to be your daughter. It was a moment of pure happiness, something everyone needed after so many challenges and difficulties. Sophia had finally found what she had always wanted. A home, a family that loved her unconditionally. From that day on, the legal process for the adoption began, and although there were still bureaucratic obstacles to overcome, the most important thing had already been achieved. The love and security Sophia now had in her life. The day of the adoption finalization was marked by a small celebration. Isabel, Mr. Valdez, and even Detective Ramiro came to celebrate Sophia's new beginning. In court, where the adoption was formally completed, the judge looked at Sophia with a gentle smile. Congratulations, young lady. Today you gain a new life, a new family. Take good care of them, just as they will take care of you. Sophia, now officially part of Antonio and Clara's family, felt enveloped in a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. As everyone gathered around her, celebrating that special moment. She knew she was finally home. Antonio and Clara, with radiant smiles, embraced Sophia between them. What started as a casual meeting on a busy street had culminated in a journey of love, courage, and hope. Now, they could all finally look to the future with confidence, knowing that together they could overcome any challenge that lay ahead. So, Sophia, now officially part of the family, flourished in ways Antonio and Clara could never have imagined. She excelled in school, made new friends easily, and her teachers never stopped praising her intelligence and kindness. Although the scars of the past were still there, they no longer defined her. Sophia was learning to live in love without fear. One sunny Saturday afternoon, while Antonio and Clara were tidying up the garden, Sophia came running to them, holding a drawing she had made. "Look at what I did!" she exclaimed with a radiant smile. Antonio and Clara stopped what they were doing to look at the drawing. It was a simple but meaningful picture. A house with a big heart on the roof and 3 figures holding hands in front, representing the 3 of them together. At the top, Sophia had written in big letters, "My family." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes, and Antonio, with a warm smile, pulled Sophia into a hug. "It's beautiful, Sophia. We'll put it on the fridge so everyone can see it." Sophia smiled even more, pleased with their reaction. "I wanted to show how much I love you. I'm so happy here." Clara gently stroked Sophia's hair, emotional. "We love you very much too, Sophia, and we're so happy to have you in our lives." The drawing was placed on the fridge, where it reminded the family every day of the love and unity they had built together. But despite the peace they had finally achieved, Antonio and Clara knew that Sophia's past couldn't be ignored. They had promised to be by her side through every stage, including the difficult task of facing painful memories. With the support of a specialized therapist, Sophia began to explore her experiences in a healthy way. She shared her stories, cried the tears that were still held back, and gradually began to heal her deeper wounds. Antonio and Clara attended all the important sessions, reinforcing their unconditional support for her. In one session, Sophia looked at Antonio and Clara with a serious expression that surprised them. "Do you think I'll forget what happened at the orphanage? That one day I won't be scared anymore." Antonio, always sensitive to Sophia's concerns, answered honestly, "Sophia, you may never forget what happened, but what's important is that you're no longer alone in facing these fears. We're all here to help you find ways to live with these memories without letting them control you." Clara added with her soothing and comforting voice, "What matters is that you are so much stronger than anything that happened to you, and over time, these memories will lose the power they have over you. We'll build new memories together, ones that will be much stronger and full of love." Sophia looked thoughtful but then smiled, a smile that showed her growing confidence. "I like that idea, building new memories." And that's exactly what they did. The family began to spend more time on activities that strengthened their bond. Weekend trips, reading afternoons, movie nights at home where they laughed and had fun together. Sophia developed a love for sports and started swimming, where she quickly excelled. Antonio and Clara never missed a competition, always cheering for her enthusiastically. One day, during one of these events, Sophia, now more confident, looked at the audience and saw Antonio and Clara waving excitedly. She felt a wave of happiness and belonging that filled her with energy. When she won her first medal, she ran straight to them, hugging them tightly. "This medal is for you," she said with a proud smile. Antonio, with tears in his eyes, replied, "We've already won the greatest medal of all, Sophia, and it's you." Life went on, and Sophia continued to grow, surrounded by love and support. But Antonio and Clara knew that at some point, Sophia might want to know more about her past, about her biological parents. They were ready to face that conversation, knowing it was important for her healthy development. So, on a quiet night, while they were sitting together in the living room, Sophia brought up the subject. "Antonio, Clara, I know you're my family now, but I want to know more about my real parents. What happened to them?" Antonio and Clara looked at each other, already prepared for this question. Clara was the first to speak. "Sophia, we always knew this day would come, and we want you to know that it's completely natural to want to learn about your biological parents. What we know is that your mother loved you very much. She couldn't care for you, but she did her best to protect you." Antonio added, holding Sophia's hand, "Whatever you want to find out, we'll support you. We can look for more information together if that's what you wish." Sophia thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I want to know more, but I'm happy to have you. I don't want that to change." Clara smiled, relieved. "Nothing will change, Sophia. We'll face this together as a family." The conversation about Sophia's past marked the beginning of a new phase in her life. With Antonio and Clara's support, she began to explore her roots, always with the assurance that her family was by her side, no matter what she discovered. They visited places, met people who had known her biological parents, and gradually Sophia began to piece together her story. Time passed, and Sophia grew into a strong, confident young woman, full of dreams. She always knew her life story began with pain, but she also knew that pain was not the end. It was just the beginning of a journey that led her to find the love, security, and happiness she had always sought. At her high school graduation, Antonio and Clara were in the audience, proud as Sophia walked onto the stage to receive her diploma. When the school principal called her to give the graduation speech, the audience fell silent. Sophia looked at the crowd, saw her adoptive parents smiling, and felt the weight of everything she had accomplished. "My life began in a way I never expected," she started with a strong voice. "But I've learned that what matters is not how we start, but what we do with the time we have. I've been lucky to find a family that loves and supports me, a family that has shown me that no matter how difficult the path, we can always find light at the end of the tunnel." She paused, looking directly at Antonio and Clara. "I want to thank my parents, who have given me everything I've always wanted: love, security, and a home. You are the reason I'm here today, and I will be eternally grateful." The audience stood and applauded, and as Sophia left the stage, she felt she had completed a cycle. The painful past was now part of a story of overcoming and love. She had found her family and knew that the future was bright ahead of her. Antonio and Clara hugged her as she came off the stage, all of them in tears. "You were amazing," Clara said, holding Sophia's face between her hands. "We love you so much." "I love you too," Sophia replied with a smile that lit up her face. "And I always will." And so, they left the auditorium together, ready to face whatever the future had in store. Sophia, Antonio, and Clara knew that life was full of challenges, but also moments of joy, and together, they knew they could overcome anything. In the end, what mattered was that they were a family built with love, courage, and hope, and that was all they needed to be happy.